Dear friends, welcome to our new session. And we are very welcome to join us Rabbi Nathan Alfred, who will speak about the communities and 21st century interesting ideas and changes. And I really want to say thank you to you, Nathan, for being with us and for your wish to join our conference. So please tell us a little bit about yourself and about your new position in World Union.
Thank you very much, Rita. Good evening, everybody. I think it's been a great weekend for the World Union, Progressive Judaism, the movement, the global movement, a fantastic weekend across the Russian-speaking world, including, of course, in Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia. My name is Rabbi Nathan Alfred. I'm a rabbi. You probably can understand from the accent, I'm a British rabbi by birth, and I'm now a British Israeli rabbi, having moved to Jerusalem earlier this year, and working now for the World Union for Progressive Judaism as head of international development and community building. I'd like to start by just outlining my credentials for speaking tonight to you. And so let me just share a picture. Let's see if it comes up. This is a picture of my great-grandfather, Alfred Rubinstein, who moved from Minsk to London with his wife in the early 20th century, in the first decade of the 20th century. I feel that community building is somewhat genetic, in my genes at least, because it's said that when he arrived in London, he helped set up the synagogue in Shepherd's Bush in West London, where he lived. Now, we know very little really about our relatives. It's always a good idea to ask your parents about their parents and their families before they pass away. My advice for the evening. But we know that he was a tailor, Schneider. He had a tailor's shop in the West End of London, and during the First World War, his shop had the name Rubinstein written on the window of the shop. And during the during the First World War, it didn't seem like such a good idea to have a shop with a German name on it. Maybe someone would come along and smash your windows in. And so the family changed their name from Rubinstein to Alfred, which happened to be his first name. So it's not clear if he became Fred Alfred or Alfred Alfred or how it was, but that's how my family name got anglicized from Rubinstein to Alfred, and why I have such a funny sounding Jewish name today. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about some experiences that I've had in building communities, and what I mean by the title of my talk today, creating intense communities. So we'll put away great-grandfather Alfred for a moment. What does it mean to have an intense community? Well, if we look at the dictionary, here we go. An intense community is one of extreme force, degree, or strength. So we're looking at what do I mean by intense? A strong community. Or, second meaning, having or showing strong feelings or opinions, extremely earnest or serious. It gives the example, an intense young woman, passionate about her art. So we're talking about a passionate community. So what do I mean by creating intense communities? Communities which are strong and which are passionate about who they are. I think it's a similar concept, but not the same, to the notion of anti-fragility, which is an idea that's been put forward by Nassim Taleb, amongst others. A property of systems that anti-fragility is a property of systems that increase in capability to thrive as a result of stresses, shocks, volatility, noise, mistakes, faults, attacks, or failures. A concept developed by Professor Nassim Nicholas Taleb in his book Anti-Fragile and in technical papers. And if we're going to get technical, Taleb explains that anti-fragility is fundamentally different from concepts of being resilient, resiliency, the ability to recover from failure, and robustness, the ability to resist failure. And it's this concept has been applied in all kinds of different sciences. Now, I think 2020 is a year that has encouraged anti-fragility, but I'm not sure that we can make such a claim for our communities to go quite as far as Taleb would want us to. I give his quote again. If you can understand this, you're better than me. Simply, anti-fragility is defined as a convex response to a stressor or source of harm, leading to a positive sensitivity to increase in volatility or variability, stress, dispersion of outcomes. Likewise, fragility is defined as a concave sensitivity to stresses, leading to a negative sensitivity to increase in volatility. Now, in short, I think he'd like to say that, we, in a time of trouble, in a time of stress, in a 2020, let's say, then our communities should only get stronger and do even better. And I'm not sure we can make such a claim. So I'm not looking to create anti-fragile communities, but rather simply intense communities that are strong and that are passionate and that can at least hold their own in a time of crisis like the one we find ourselves in. Because 2020 has really been the year of Zoom. I mean, some say the year of doom, but hopefully there's a ray of light and we'll come out of it with whichever vaccine or whichever way we can. But it's certainly been the year of Zoom. As a community rabbi in Singapore, I found myself from April to August on Zoom for Shabbat services, for bar mitzvahs, even for circumcision, Brit Milah, doing them on Zoom. And at first there was something of a novelty to it. And it's true, it allows people to attend services, to attend rituals without having to leave their homes. And for the homebound, that can be very important. But, there are limits to this Zoom life. And, since August, when I've not had the responsibilities in a community, rather been a little bit on break and had the chance to watch all of our communities or many of our communities around the world, that break, that chance, that possibility to be an onlooker, it's very interesting again at the beginning. But after a while, after a few months, you do wonder that everyone makes such big efforts to create the same product. I give an example. The music of the progressive movement or the Jewish music worldwide has become remarkably homogenized, right? You hear the same tunes, whether you're in Sydney or Cape Town or Minsk or London or Brussels or goodness knows where. And on the one hand, that's amazing, the sense of unity that we're all singing the same song, that we can all attend each other's services everywhere. It's fantastic. But on the other hand, it does become kind of boring, right? There is something in variety in the Jewish world that makes it exciting and that makes it strong, that creates that passion. That I wonder, is with this, there seems this tendency for the same stuff, this homogenization, develops a sense of ennui as well. And I wonder what's missing in our Zoom Judaism, which some people think is the next stage of Judaism, but which I very much hope to resist once it's possible to meet again. I joke that the main reason I became a rabbi was because of Kiddush, right? That growing up, going to shul, going to synagogue, Kiddush was like the best meal of the week, and kind of very exciting. And of course, there's no Zoom Kiddush that's been created as far as I know. I also miss the hugs and the kisses, shaking hands, the touch, the human warmth that you get with the physical touch that comes in communal life as well. We don't get on Zoom. And of course, I miss somewhat of the drama. I mean, we have Zoom dramas of our own with lost connections, missed connections, but it's not the same as everyone being in the same room and watching the interactions between the people. And I think most of all, what I miss, it's hearing the stories, because what is a community and what is an intense community? And this is what I will try to define now. I think it's knowing other people's stories. So it's talking to people, it's listening to people, it's knowing a bit about them, it's knowing where they come from, knowing where they come from, not just literally, geographically, but where they really come from in their attitudes and in their lives. And I think as a rabbi, I've had the privilege to hear a lot of people's stories from my communities, to get to know them very well. And this is done on the margins of a synagogue, at that Kiddush table, in the rabbi's office, or on the bima, or whatever. But again, it's not something that you can really do in the same way with Zoom Judaism, with what we have now. I wanted to share a little bit about one of the first communities I worked in. I spent 6 years living in a small town in Luxembourg called Esch. For those of you who know Luxembourg, this is no surprise, but for most people, it comes as a surprise that Luxembourg has more than one city, and indeed it has more than one synagogue. Before the Second World War, there were even 5 synagogues in Luxembourg. And today we have 2 Jewish communities in Luxembourg. The main traditional one in Luxembourg City, that's the big star in the middle, and the second synagogue, which was my synagogue, in a small town in the industrial southwest of the country called Esch sur Alzette. Down the end of the street of the synagogue is France. It's really on the border, on the French border, but it is in Luxembourg. Of course, Belgium is also not far away, and Germany is just a 20-minute, 30-minute drive. So it's a very small country, but it is a country with big differences between the different regions of the country and the people there. I show you a picture of Esch. Here we go. Here's our synagogue in Esch. So the community was built in the late 19th century. There was a synagogue that was constructed until the Second World War, but was destroyed in the Second World War. And after the Second World War, the government and the municipality helped the Jewish community and helped assuage their own guilt, perhaps, by building a new synagogue for the Jewish community. And so it's known as the Canal Synagogue because it's on Canal Street, Rue de Canal. But when I moved there in 2009, and actually I lived in the house next door to the synagogue, the house you can see on the left. It was a very small community with its own building. I'll share another picture of the inside of the community. So the inside is a bit warmer and a bit nicer. When I arrived in Esch, in the synagogue, it was a community, a traditional, let's say Orthodox, but certainly traditional community that was dying. When I arrived, the only activity of the community was to meet on Friday nights whenever there was a yard site, and to try to gather a minyan just on those particular Fridays when someone had a yard site, when someone had a parent who had died and they wanted to say Kaddish in their memory. And so on arriving in Esch as the rabbi, I received a list of about 20 names of men in the community and in the Luxembourg community, and their telephone numbers. And my main job of the week when I began was to call the names on the list and try and muster a minyan for Friday night. And often the president of the community would call me on Friday lunchtime, and his question would be, okay, so how many do we have for the minyan? And we could count on maybe 5 regulars, including me, the president, and the president's son. So that left two old men who've since, Zichronam Livracha, who've since passed away, Mr. Wolf and Mr. Finkelstein. And then we had to each week gather 5 more men to come and say Kaddish. And I understood from this that saying Kaddish, having a minyan for Kaddish, was the faint heartbeat of a community that was nearly dead, but the heartbeat kept beating. It wasn't that they met to celebrate each other's birthdays, or someone became 80 or 60 or 50. They didn't have these kind of celebrations for the living together. But what they had was, okay, Mr. Finkelstein's mother died, her yahrzeit in 2 weeks. Okay, please, let's try and get a minyan together so that we could say Kaddish. And of course, I came as a young liberal rabbi who believes in equality and believes in counting women in the minyan alongside the men. But I encountered resistance not only for the men for counting their wives and their women and the women in the community, but also from the women who didn't want originally the responsibility of being counted alongside their husbands and having to go to synagogue on a Friday night. They were quite happy for their husbands to have this honor, this responsibility. And it took me about yes.
I have the question: you choose this community to come to after your study process, or like why this small town? Why this community? What was the purpose?
It's a good question. So actually, at the same time, I had a half position in the Brussels community, the liberal community, which was about a 2-hour drive. Not that I drove then, but about a 2-hour drive, 3-hour train ride from Luxembourg. And so I was looking for a position that would complement my work in Brussels. And I was introduced to this community, and I kind of understood it was small. But when I went there for the first Shabbat, it was the first Shabbat after my ordination, they packed the synagogue with every Jew they could find in the whole of Luxembourg. They borrowed Jews from the city, they borrowed everyone they could, and they kind of showed me what an active and bustling and thriving community it was. So I was kind of slightly fooled into going there, but also charmed by the president, and I'm in very good relations with the president, another Mr. Wolf, who told me, look, I don't want to be the last president of the synagogue. I've been president of the synagogue for 25 years. I don't want to be the last president. And actually, I worked there for 6 years, and afterwards, Rabbi Alexander Grodensky, who I'm sure many of you know as well, became rabbi after me. And finally, early this year, Mr. Wolf stopped being president, and we have a new president of the synagogue. So he fulfilled my promise of not letting him be the last president of the community. So I went there because it worked out for me being in Brussels as well as being in Luxembourg. But also, I think I saw the potential for turning around a community that was dying and making it live again. The potential was there because Luxembourg was not just a country full of elderly Jews who had survived the Holocaust, as so many of our members. We were under 20. We were fewer than 20 members when I got there. But actually, Luxembourg is one of the capitals of Europe, and many Jews have moved to Luxembourg to work in the European Court of Justice or institutions, European institutions. A lot of translation gets done there. So there are a lot of, for example, Hungarian Jewish translators in Luxembourg. And over the 6 years I was there, we managed to build up from this irregular Kaddish minyan to build the rhythms of prayer and the rhythms of culture and education that you would expect, in other communities as well. So by the time we finished, I think we were about 4 or 5 times bigger than when I started 6 years before. And people had got into the rhythm of coming to synagogue. They got in the rhythm of volunteering, of joining the board, of spending time with each other, of building something a bit more intense than the very kind of weak but vital connection that I'd started with just the occasional Kaddish. It took some doing to have a first bat mitzvah there. Girls had never read from the scroll in Luxembourg, and so that was a big step when the first girl, Chiara Wolf, another wolf, a lot of wolves in Luxembourg, read from the Torah. But after that, the dam was broken, and we ushered in full equality. We had our first gay and lesbian members of the board, which was also an important step. We had women counting in the minyan, and we, at the same time, we tried to keep the relations with the other Jewish community in Luxembourg, and that was very important to everybody as well. So I think, being in Luxembourg taught me about the basic rhythm, the basic heartbeat of a community. Being the need to say Kaddish, that was what kept them alive in intensive care, to the point where someone could step in and take them in a more liberal direction. And today the community is flourishing, and I'm very happy when things can flourish without me or without the rabbi that started it being there. It's great to see that it can continue. So yeah, after 6 years in Luxembourg, I moved to Singapore, which was a very different experience, a very different country, as you can imagine.
How long you stay there in Esh?
I was 6 years in Esh.
Okay.
6 years in Esh, 2009 to 2014, 2015, something like this. Yeah. This is a picture from Singapore. So very different community in Singapore, much more vibrant in many ways, very young, a lot of working age people, working age population with children, very few elderly people, because most people are expats and foreigners, and when you stop working, you're not allowed to stay in Singapore. So you have to retire somewhere else. Singapore is not a place to be old, and they don't like it if you're old there, so they send you home. So we had a very young demographic, and we developed what I jokingly call sofa Judaism. We didn't have a building in Singapore. We looked at buying a building, but it seemed to be about $20 million. Real estate is shockingly expensive in Singapore, which was well beyond the means of our community, which was about 150, 160 families. So we met in people's homes, on people's sofas, and again, I think the big difference that I helped to change, to increase the intensity of the community when I was there, that was one, creating a Sunday school, a Hebrew school, so that kids could study from age 3 to 13 and prepare for their bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah. Now that sounds obvious, but I was always amazed when one of the parents said to me, "Wow, it's like my children can meet their Jewish friends every week, and they finally they can really be friends with them." And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of what community is, and we can do that for adults too. If we come together and pray, or come together on Friday night, or do something as well, and it can also be amazing. Because when I'd got there, the synagogue, the community, they met once a month on a Friday night. So they met once a month on a Friday night to have Shabbat service and dinner, and that was it for the month. They also had a Hanukkah party, and of course Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Pesach, a Purim party perhaps but the gathering of the community was based around meeting once a month for Shabbat, once a month for prayer. And this was partly because it was difficult to find somewhere to meet. When they met, it was maybe 100, 120 people, need to be in a big space and with a dinner afterwards to help pay for that space. So there were some practical reasons, but basically they were meeting once a month, and people have busy lives, they work hard, they go away at the weekends, they fly to Bali, they fly goodness knows where, not anymore of course, but Singapore was a place where people were flying every weekend on short holidays and short breaks. So people weren't so interested in praying more. It was a struggle to start a Saturday morning service because people just weren't used to it, didn't want to do it. But again, over time, it took a couple of years, but eventually people started to attend more frequently, to understand the joy of reading the Torah, of singing together, of sharing, different people talking about different topics, of coming together and building the community, building the intensity of getting to know each other, and hopefully wanting to see each other. Now, I don't know if you know.
You said, Nathan, you said that it was the community of people who has kids, so nothing according to the Jewish education for kids was there. Like they wasn't interested in some education for their kids.
So until I got there, there was basically nothing. But within a month of arriving, we created a Sunday school, a cheder, Talmud Torah, with I think 50 or 60 kids. So there was definitely the potential, but it needed someone, and perhaps a rabbi, or it needed someone to say, "Hey, this is what we're doing. Let's book the space. Let's take in the money. Let's make it happen." And once it happened, until today, it's been a flourishing Sunday school. It's been a flourishing education program. So, I was lucky, I guess, to be their first residential rabbi. Before me, there was just a rabbi who came twice a year for Rosh Hashanah, Kippur, and for Pesach. But having a rabbi sitting in that synagogue, or sitting in Singapore, saying, "Hey, we need to do this," that's when things changed. Okay. Now, I wonder if I asked the question, where is the world's smallest synagogue, whether you could tell me. I mean, maybe Rita knows, or maybe someone knows on the Facebook chat. I give you a picture to give you a clue. Anyone been here?
I don't know.
So this is in Hungary. I think one of the world's biggest synagogues, the Dolchan Utca synagogue, is in Hungary as well. Perhaps some of you have been there. And this is just a little bit up the river, up the Danube, in a suburban city in Budapest called Szentendre, St. Andrew, Szentendre. And it's known as the world's smallest synagogue. But I think from what I haven't actually been there. I did live in Budapest for a year, but I didn't get to Szentendre synagogue. I think from what I read, it seats about 20 people. Okay, so they claim to be the world's smallest synagogue, and if anyone knows anywhere smaller, then it would be great to share it with us, because this is their claim, Szentendre in Hungary. But in Singapore, we claim to have an even smaller synagogue, and I give you an example. Okay, so this became our synagogue in Singapore. It's the synagogue office. So we rented a small office in a very drab, very rundown building called the Peace Center, Shalom, the Peace Center, and we're up on the 5th floor, and in a corner office. So we got to have a few windows, but in that small space, we created a synagogue. You can see me reading the Torah with our Gabbai Dina next to us, and Bat Mitzvah girl, one of our Bat Mitzvah girls, Vanessa, and you can see behind us the Ark, which was lovingly made by some of our members to fit the office space, and the curtain was made by one of our members as well. And this space could fit about 15 chairs. So we think that's smaller than S'entendre, and you had to really cram up the chairs together. And why did we do it? Because after my mother died, I wanted a place to be able to say Kaddish for her regularly. And being in Singapore with a community that met irregularly on Shabbat, that met every other Saturday or every other Friday, but not all the time, and that's still the case till today. I wanted to have a sense that I was at least saying Kaddish for my mum once a week. And so in 2017, I started this minyan purely by WhatsApp, by counting people, by asking people, hey, can you come to the office 7:30 Thursday morning? I need you to make 10. And thankfully, you learn very quickly who you can rely on and who will tell you yes and not turn up. But we managed for the whole year of my morning, the whole year of Kaddish. I think we missed the minyan maybe twice in the whole of the year. And then we were 9 instead of 10. It was always very close. And so we crammed into this office. We did a very short, quick shacharit. People had to go to work afterwards, so it was always important to finish. We started at 7:30. We had to finish exactly by 8:30, or someone would go crazy. And we read the Torah, and it built up like this. And for 1 year, I managed it, for my own WhatsApping. And finally, after the year of mourning finished, and I asked people, do you want to continue? I've been very grateful to you all until now. Very thankful to you all for coming, for supporting. I know it's not easy getting up so early in the morning. Do you want to keep going? And thankfully, the regulars, and they've become some regulars by then, and including people who lost their parents as well. Just seeing the question, I'll come to that in just a minute. They decided to continue the minyan, to create a WhatsApp group, and this continues until today. I left the community in the summer, or I left Singapore a year ago, and the minyan still continues in an online form. And again, I'm glad to have created something that can manage without me when I had to leave. So we had a question that Rita just shared with me from Alan. Do you have a short list to suggest local leaders on how to re-energize small communities in 5 places of the World Union family? Where to start? Children education, adult education, bar bat mitzvah. What do you suggest? Okay, super. So yeah, I wanted to come to this question in the remainder of my talk. Just be another 5 minutes or so. I think with new communities, and we'll come to what it means for re-energizing communities, but for new communities, and I helped in Asia to build new communities in various far-flung places, including Bali, including Phnom Penh, in Cambodia, including in Vietnam and Laos. I think it starts very simply with maybe a Shabbat once a month, maybe not prayers, but maybe just a Shabbat dinner with maybe lighting candles, a few songs. It starts with a Hanukkah party, possibly Purim, and maybe a Rosh Hashanah meal and a Pesach Seder. Right? I think those are the basic elements for a new community to start in any of the city, in any new city, and to see what develops from that. Right? To have a basic coming together for social reasons, for Jewish identity reasons, for Jewish food, for maybe Jewish music, for all the fun stuff, and to use that, to use people's natural networks that they happen to know, another Jew or whatever, to build up a community from the very, very beginning. And not to get crazy with prayers or with education even too much, but to start slowly and to see what's possible. Because especially these days, if someone really wants to get a Jewish education, it's no longer necessary to do it locally. You don't necessarily need your local community, local rabbi or anything for that. There are plenty of options. Even before the Zoom Judaism, Even online, there are plenty of internet resources, and people can take classes, anywhere in the world now. So if someone's keen to learn for bar mitzvah, that's possible. But what are we trying to create in our communities, intense communities? These are communities where people look out for each other, where people know about each other, they know each other's stories, and they care for each other, and they want to spend time with each other. And I think that's what we're doing. So perhaps to re-energize a community, I would suggest starting with sharing the stories of the members, right? Giving people a chance to talk about where they come from, where their Judaism comes from, and to start to understand each other better. In Luxembourg, we did this with the Cercle de Témoignage, the Circle of Witnesses, and this was sharing the stories, usually of the older members, how they survived the Shoah, how they survived the Holocaust, or from their children, what it's like being in the second generation. And gradually the circle widened to tell other stories, the flight of some of the Sephardi Jews from North Africa to France, or to Israel, and eventually to Luxembourg. I think it's very, very important to understand someone, to know their story. And of course, we're all a little bit crazy in the Jewish community as well. And sometimes it helps to understand where some of that craziness might come from. So just to finish off, as I said at the beginning, I'm working now as for the World Union as head of international development and community building. And part of that job is to strengthen the existing communities, particularly through developing leadership, through some of the programs that the World Union offers, for the board leadership, for rabbinic leadership, for educational leadership. And partly it's to offer advice if it wants to be, or to help model ways for communities to grow, to re-energize, and to encourage new communities to connect and to build, and to be a resource in this direction as well. So maybe I'll end there. I don't know, Rita, if there's any other questions, and thank you for listening. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Maybe I will check now the additional questions, but I have also one general one. When we are talking about the community twinning process, so I believe we have a lot of programs of twinning projects with Israeli movement, with the twin communities all around the world, from United States and from Canada and from Australia. But I think that today, if we are talking about the Belarus, Russia and Ukraine, we have less communities that are twinned with the other communities aboard. What do you think about the twinning in general? If there is a future to twin relationship between communities, and which kind of relationship? Saying that we are facing now the new era of Zoom Judaism, I like your new word. So if you can share your vision, how can we be connected, and what kind of connection needed to this twinning relationship?
Thanks, Rita. I think it's a great question. So yeah, in this age of Zoom Judaism, the twinning options become tremendous. And, I've heard about communities over the high holidays deciding to work together, smaller communities with larger communities, to share, services, to be online together. So I think it happened in Guatemala and Costa Rica, with Argentina. I think I've heard of a community in Lyon, in France, taking services with a community in Haifa, in Israel, I think, as well. Sometimes this makes sense linguistically, or it makes sense culturally. It's very possible now for groups to be together. We also tried it in Asia, not so much twinning, but to have a regional Havdalah, for example, where we were all online together, but each community a different week led the service and led the discussions. So I think it is a time to come together and really twin. I think that with the FSU, with the Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine communities, twinning relationships are very important and should continue going forward. I think the longer the time goes since the breakup of the Soviet Union and the mass immigrations from the Soviet Union to Germany, to the US, to Israel, to other countries, that maybe the direct connections start to fade a little bit between the different countries. And it's I think something to think about how to maintain this and what the relationship should be. Actually, if you're in a megabuck community in the States with a 20 million budget, then you don't always realize that $10,000 or $20,000 can support one of our small but vital communities in Belarus, in Russia, and Ukraine for a whole year. And what might seem like small change to some is actually exactly what's needed for another. And so, on the one hand, equal relationships between partners is very important, and that we can do on Zoom in a way. And on the other hand, I think the financial relationships that help keep alive some of the smaller communities, not just in FSU but around the world, is very important as well, and I think will have continued importance. I see there's another comment from Alan. Who comments that using Jewish holidays and Shabbat to keep the attention of the community with ideas that they're familiar with. I think that's very important as well. And we're blessed with a natural calendar which has enough things in it. Once a month we seem to have a festival. This is always my kind of joking advice to interfaith couples or that come to me, or rather the parents, the worried parents, Jewish parents of interfaith couples that come to me. What are we going to do? My son's marrying a non-Jew. My daughter's marrying a non-Jew. How can we keep Judaism for our grandchildren when they come? I think that Judaism usually wins at home, or it has very good potential for winning in the home, because one day Christmas against 8 days of Hanukkah, Easter, there's Easter eggs, but Pesach can be fun as well. And in between we have Purim, we have Shabbat, we have Sukkot, we have Shavuot, and we have plenty of things. We have Shabbat every week, like those candles. It's the rhythm, it's the resonance of the home rituals that you can do, that you can provide for your grandchildren, that kind of help keep the next generation Jewish. So all in all, I'm very upbeat about the world to come. I hope that we get through this era of doom, this era of Zoom, and that we can return to some sense of normality in the coming year.
Thank you very, very much. It was wonderful to hear your vision and your experience as a rabbi during this long period of time, from a small and very, very, very unregular for liberal rabbi community that is coming after the study process to Singapore, and now to Jerusalem, coming back to Israel. So I'm full of hope that we will have many other opportunities also to hear from you and to learn from you, and looking forward to work to create those intensive communities all over the world, and in Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus specifically. And if you can just top your, 3 or 5 top things about the intense community from your point of view, personal, what will be your top?
So I imagine that the top one I have is to think of the community as a big family, and I certainly had the luck to grow up in a community that felt like an enlarged family. where everybody knew the problems of everybody else. Everyone knew the troubles, why this family didn't talk to this family, or why this one never speaks to this one. But it was kind of part of growing up to grow up in this kind of family. And I guess I looked partly the idea of intensity is to kind of increase that kind of family sense of caring for each other. So family would be my number one. Number two, I go back to the idea of story, that it's very important to listen to each other, and to listen to all the members of the community, old and young, and to hear their stories, to understand who they are through telling of tales, telling of stories, not just on Pesach, where we tell the ancient story coming out of Egypt, and then sometimes we talk about our own family histories of coming out of the FSU, or coming out of North Africa, or coming to the United States, or whatever the story might be. Everyone has their own stories of freedom, of flight, of exodus, but also the simpler stories that we might not hear as well. What it's like to be in a family where someone is deaf, what it's like to be in a family where someone is mentally ill, to understand those stories too, and understand that everyone has a story. Everyone has a story, and it's something that's wonderful if they can share it. So family number one, stories number two. And I think for me, three, being a rabbi, I guess I should put on my yarmulke, but I think minyan or prayer is a big thing for me as well. That actually prayer or minyan is a way of people to come together, hopefully in a non-hierarchical way. That hopefully if you're an adult Jew, then you count in a minyan, and it's something you can do. You can pray together without having to pay for a ticket to a concert, without having to speak necessarily, without having to do anything. It's enough for you just to be there, and that's enough to play your part in the community. Hopefully you can do more if you want to, but that you don't have to. And so that prayer or services, they offer a place for people to come and just to be themselves, and for it to be enough that they're there, that they're there, and they're them, and they're themselves. So, okay, what was that? One, family. Two, story. Three, minyan or prayer, something like this.
Thank you very much. It's a good top three. We'll put it also on, I think, comments for those who will listen and see this session in record. Thank you very much, Rabbi Nathan, and it was a pleasure to speak with you. And we'll be happy to see you more on our former Soviet Union events and all kind of matters. Thank you.
Thanks, Rita, and thanks for a great conference. Thanks very much.